Monster City Madhouse, a year-round online store full of Halloween and classic horror shirts, with an emphasis on the vintage look. Use code SAVE10 for 10% off your order. MonsterCityMadhouse.com. Free shipping and financing's available. Welcome back to Southern Ghost Stories. I am the American historian, Alan Searcy. I'm glad you guys are with me today. Right off the top, hey, go to the Southern Ghost Stories Facebook and Instagram pages and leave me some questions. I'm going to be doing a Q&A episode probably in 2 weeks, and I'm looking for some more questions from you guys. I answered a few questions back in December and January, kind of randomly in the middle of episodes or at the end of episodes, and I love to interact with you guys. You know, I've been to a lot of places. I got 40 books, and I've got a lot of weird wild stuff to talk about, so sometimes I may not think about to put an episode. You guys can send me a question like, oh, yeah, sure, I got a story about that. So, yeah, send me some questions, and I'll get on those here in 2 weeks. And so I've told you guys I've been to a lot of places. So I grew up in Middle Tennessee, but I had family in Huntsville. And as a kid, Huntsville's maybe an hour and a half from where I used to live. So I go down there and see my family. I had a friend in Alabaster outside Birmingham. And, of course, I'd always go down to Panama City as a kid on vacation. So I was always in and out of Alabama, driving through there, going to see someone. So there's weird local lore, not just in Alabama, but it's everywhere. But if you grew up in Birmingham, the big story is Sloss Furnaces. It was an old iron-making facility. And, you hear stories like, oh, my dad used to work there, and he saw someone fall into the molten iron there and disintegrated right in front of him. And, they swear they hear footsteps at night. And when I set out to work on Ghost Stories from Graveyard Tales, Alabama, my Alabama book a couple years ago, I had Sloss Furnaces on my radar. I had notes for it. But, when you write these books, I try to keep them around 200 pages. I can't write. I used to write books like 300, 400 pages, but it's intimidating to read a book that is 400 pages thick or long. So I keep around 200 pages, so I left out the stuff on Sloss Furnaces. And I've always kind of kicked myself because the stories are so fascinating. The history there is just bananas. So I kind of want to dig into that today. So if you drive through Birmingham, Alabama at night, the skyline is dominated by a sprawling, rusted silhouette that looks like a ribcage made of steel. That's Sloss Furnaces. It isn't just a landmark. It's a monument to an era that traded human lives for pig iron. For nearly a century, from 1882 to 1971, this place was a high-heat purgatory. It was the heart of the Magic City, but that heart was made of fire and limestone. Today I'm peeling back the rust to look at the men who built it, the accidents that claimed them, and the ghosts that, if you believe the night watchman, they say never clocked out. To really understand why Sloss Furnaces feels the way it does, you have to look at the ground it stands on. In the 1880s, Birmingham wasn't a polite southern city. It was the Wild West of the South. A raw, booming industrial frontier fueled by a geological miracle. Colonel James Withers Sloss, he was a railroad man and one of the city's founders. He realized that Alabama was the only place on earth where the big three, iron ore, coal, and limestone, all sat with a 10-mile radius. He didn't just build a factory. He built a hungry, fire-breathing machine that required constant feeding. When Sloss broke ground in 1881 and lit the first fires a year later, the city entered into the era of pig iron. The work was relentless, 24/7, and performed under the conditions that would be considered human rights violations today. But the furnaces didn't just run on coal. They ran on a brutalized workforce. Many of the men standing in that 120-degree heat were part of the convict leasing system. And this was essentially slavery by another name. The state would arrest black men on minor or fabricated charges like something like vagrancy, and then lease them out to industrial magnates like Sloss. These men worked to the point of collapse in the most hazardous zones of the plant because, to the company, they were cheaper than the machinery they operated. They were getting them almost for free. The foundation of Sloss isn't just stone and mortar. It's a social history of exploitation, extreme heat, and lives treated as expendable fuel. When you walk through the site today, the heaviness people describe isn't just about ghosts. It's the weight of a century of men who are trapped in a cycle of fire and steel with no way out. While locals talk about ghost stories and the phantoms of Sloss, the documented reality of the late 19th century furnace floor is far more chilling than any campfire tale. In a blast furnace, the margin for error isn't just thin, it's non-existent. There were no safety nets, no guardrails, and no second chances. There was only the relentless heat and the mechanical hunger of the stacks. If you slipped, you didn't just fall. You transitioned to the raw materials of the Industrial Revolution. The carnage began almost as soon as the fires were lit. In November 1882, the year Sloss opened, two black laborers, Alec King and Bob Mayfield, they were working inside the number one furnace to clear coke and ore deposits from the walls. A massive chunk of congealed ore suddenly broke loose, plunging into the furnace and releasing a tidal wave of toxic gas. Choked by the fumes, both men fell from their platforms into the furnace, and they died. That same week, a transient worker named Samuel Cunningham climbed to the top of the Alice No. 1 stack. In full view of his co-workers, he jumped directly into the roaring furnace. While no reason was ever officially given, many believe the crushing 12-hour shifts and deplorable living conditions drove him to despair. Deaths at Sloss weren't always caused by the furnaces themselves. The machinery, it was just as lethal. Now, the blowing engine house, it was one of the most gruesome documented accidents involving a worker taking a lunch break near a 20-foot flywheel. His clothing caught in the gears, and it dragged into the machine's crushing maw. His co-workers were forced to watch as his body was mangled with every rotation of that wheel. In 1888, an explosion in the engine house left 6 workers permanently burned and blind. Later, in 1892, a scaffolding collapse sent 10 workers falling 58 feet to the ground. 2 died instantly, and 8 were left in critical condition. In 1897, a painter named Joseph Webb was found dead in an open water vat on the property. His body was described as perfectly boiled, and though he's last seen with 2 new pairs of shoes for him and his wife, his death was widely suspected to be a murder. The most notorious death occurred in 1887, when Theo Jowers, an assistant founder, a man who understood the dangers better than most, he positioned himself high up in the furnace bells, working. He was attempting to make a routine adjustment to the machinery that regulated the flow of raw materials. Well, he made one fatal slip and plummeted directly into a vat of molten ore. There was no splash, no struggle. At those temperatures, often exceeding 3,000 degrees, the human body essentially vaporizes on impact. The aftermath was a scene of clinical, industrial macabre. His co-workers couldn't even attempt to rescue. They simply had to wait for the iron to cool just to see what the furnace had chosen to give back. When they finally broke into the solidified metal, they didn't find a body to bury. All that could be recovered for his casket were his head, 2 hip bones, and a handful of ash. He was quite literally forged into the iron that built the city. Now, Jowers, he was merely one installment in a blood price that Sloss collected every single year it operated. Between massive steam explosions that could level a building, men being crushed by runaway ore cars, and workers losing limbs to unpredicted gears, the site was a slaughterhouse disguised as a factory. These weren't accidents so much as they were the cost of doing business in a town that valued pig iron more than the people tasked with pouring it. As the decades rolled on and the soot thickened, the raw trauma of the furnace floor curdled into something else: folklore. The most enduring shadow over the site belongs to James Slag Wormwood, a foreman whose name has become synonymous with industrial cruelty. Legend says he was a sadistic taskmaster who worked there in the early 1900s. He drove his crew with a level of malice that bordered on the psychotic, forcing men into 12-hour shifts in life-threatening heat just to keep his production numbers high. In 1906, as the story goes, Slag finally met a poetic, if not gruesome, end. He supposedly slipped from the highest catwalk into a vat of molten iron, though in another version of the story, his exhausted, broken crew finally snapped and gave him a collective, helpful shove into the fire. Now, whether Slag was a real man or simply a personification of the brutal conditions that ate men alive there at Sloss, the reports coming out of the site have been eerily consistent for over half a century. Since the furnaces finally went cold in 1971, the silence has been filled with something unsettled. Night watchmen and urban explorers have reported the unmistakable sound of heavy work boots clanging against the metal gangways when no one else is in the building, along with phantom odors that seem to echo through the dead steam pipes. The most chilling reports, however, involve physical encounters. People navigating the high-altitude catwalks they described as spectral shove, an invisible force trying to push them toward the same ledge where Wormwood supposedly fell. Paranormal investigators have even captured EVPs of gravelly voice screaming, "Get back to work." It's a haunting reminder of a foreman who didn't realize the fires went out 50 years ago, still trying to command a crew in the factory that has long since turned to rust. So, how did a place as dangerous and haunted become a National Historic Landmark? Well, when Sloss shut down in 1971, it was slated for demolition. It was really an eyesore to most in the community, but it was also a reminder of the dark past to others. A group of citizens saw it as kind of like the Statue of Liberty of the South, a symbol of the labor that built the modern world. It was designated a National Historic Landmark in 1981, making it the only 20th century blast furnace in the U.S. being preserved as a museum. Today, it hosts metal art workshops, concerts, and fittingly, one of the country's biggest haunted houses. It's a place where you can touch the iron, smell the rust, and feel the weight of the history there. Sloss Furnaces is a reminder that industrial progress is a human cost. The screams people hear today, maybe they're legends. Maybe they're just lingering memory of men like Theo Jowers, whose stories are literally baked into the steel of the city. So yeah, Sloss Furnaces, it's just brutal, and the stories there are just bonkers. I've heard them for years, people who grew up in Birmingham. Like I mentioned, there's one guy told me his dad, he was working, I think, back in the 60s or 70s, and someone just slipped and fell into a big vat of boiling molten iron. I mean, that's a horrible way to go out, but, I don't know. So I'm talking about Alabama ghost stories. And so Birmingham, if you guys heard about the Redmond Hotel, I may have mentioned it a while back on a previous episode. When I was working on the Alabama book, I went down to Birmingham for a weekend. This is where I kind of did some digging into Sloss Furnaces. But I spent the weekend at the Redmond. Of course, Redmont's an old, beautiful hotel. I think it was built in the early 20th century. And they say that Hank Williams, that's where he supposedly spent his last night before he died. They say the place is haunted by Hank Williams. I'm not sure if that's true or not. They say that there are several places all over the country that like to that claim that. But in the Redmont, there's all kinds of stories. I talked to people, I talked to a guy who worked there as a maintenance man, and he had a drink. He was down there in the basement where they do the laundry, and he put his drink on one of the washing machines, and he set it down, turned around, and boom, that drink just jumped off the washing machine and flew right past him. Talked to people at the front desk, and they see weird things. They see shadows moving around. They hear footsteps, especially late at night. But one of the weirdest stories, there's the story goes, one of the owners of Redmont back in the mid-20th century, the hotel business had dipped and his health also declined. He decided he was going to end it all and jump off the roof. So he decided he was going to end it all. He climbed to the roof. Well, he didn't want to just jump. He wanted to take his little dog with him. He had a little doggy that he adored. And when he jumped, he was carrying the dog. And when they found him on the sidewalk below, a short time later, his dog had also tragically perished in the ordeal. So ever since then, they say that at the Redmont, guests will hear a dog barking randomly. And of course, there's no animals allowed on the property. Of course, they do allow service dogs, but those are kind of rare. So I stayed there, I mentioned, when I worked on the Alabama book. And that night around 9 o'clock, I was in my room, and I was trying to get my little boy settled in bed. And I heard like a barking of a dog in the hallway. And I thought that was just kind of strange, to hear a dog in the hallway. So that next morning, I went down to the front desk, and I was talking to some of the staff members. I wanted to get their opinion or hear their ghost stories. And they were talking, and I said, well, I last night around 9 o'clock, actually, no, the version of the story, how it really went, I was talking to them. They said, well, yeah, people on the ninth floor occasionally, they'll say they hear a dog barking sometimes late at night. And I just kind of smiled, and the lady kind of like, what? I said, well, around 9 o'clock, I heard a dog barking outside my room in the hallway. And I said, well, and I want to debunk everything I can. So I said, well, somebody probably had a dog. She said, well, we don't have dogs in here, but service animals are allowed. I said, well, can you look and see how many service animals were in the hotel last night? So she went to her computer, punched a few buttons. And she said, oh, sir, there were no service animals checked in last night. So I guess I got to experience the ghost dog of the Redmont there. So, yeah. So if you're ever down in Birmingham, go check out Sloss Furnaces. Go over to the Redmont. Redmont, it's a beautiful old classic hotel from early 20th century, man. I really dug it there. They got a nice little lobby. It's right close to everything. It's in walking distance of everything in Birmingham. So, yeah. Birmingham, Alabama is just a wild place. Like I mentioned, there's a Frankenstein story in Huntsville, and the Alabama White thing, the cryptid they see in northern Alabama. It's kind of like a Bigfoot. I'm not sure if you know the story, but there's like an albino Bigfoot. It's like just solid white. And they see him out in the woods out there in Birmingham. In the woods, just kind of right there by the river. No, it's Huntsville, I'm sorry. They see him up there in northern Alabama by the woods. And yeah, it's really, really weird and wild. But Alabama's got just a lot of weird history, ghost stories, folklore, even cryptids. So, yeah, check out Ghost Stories and Graveyard Tales, Alabama. I cover a lot of weird, wild stuff, Frankenstein, cryptids, ghost stories, a lot of the legends there, from Mobile to Huntsville. There's just weird folklore all throughout Alabama. So as we wrap up, please, guys, go to Southern Ghost Stories on Instagram, Facebook, follow us, send me some questions. Also, wherever you listen to this episode, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, go in there and leave a review. Those are really helpful. I can't tell you how much those mean to me, how great they are for the show. It really helps us get up there in the algorithm and the rankings and so other folks can find the show. So also, go to Amazon.com. You can type my name in, Alan Searcy. You can find all my books there. I've got over 40 books. Hex, Ghost Stories and Graveyard Tales, Alabama. Southern Ghost Stories, New Orleans. I've got books from all over. Next book drops April 30th. Pistols at Red River, and it's a story of Andrew Jackson, the Doolin story. I think I mentioned that a week or two ago. Yeah, there's a Doolin story a little bit north of Nashville, up on the Red River, close to the Kentucky line. Actually, the Kentucky line. Andrew Jackson got into a duel with a young man named Charles Dickinson. So that's a weird story, because actually there was two duels. There's a duel that kind of led to the other duel, and it's just bananas. But yeah, that's coming April 30th. I'm excited about that. I've got some media appearances lined up. Also, this summer I've got some appearances lined up. I'll be at CreepyCon in Knoxville. I'll be at Smoky Mountain Terror, Johnson City. I've got some stuff in the works at Louisville HorrorCon. I'll be there. Also looking to do the Goatman Festival again. I haven't that's not official, but I've been talking to the promoter, and I'll probably be out there for that one also. So, yeah, lots of places I'm going to be this year, and I'm excited. I mean, it's still early in the year, but yeah, ghost stories are coming your way, man. Just come find me. I'll be out there somewhere. So, I'll see you guys on Friday. Check back here in a couple days. Check out the exclusive shirts from Monster City Madhouse, Gravestone, Rocktober, and Val Halloween. All that and much more at MonsterCityMadhouse.com.